Hassan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
My
So,
pleasure.
something that you talk about a lot in your book is the importance of having natural talents, but you describe yourself as an unnatural entrepreneur. So, I want to know why you became so successful at entrepreneurship if you don't think you're naturally good at it.
Oh, that's a really good question. Okay. There's a part in the book where I describe a scene from Harry Potter where they try on the sorting
Yeah,
hats. I don't know if you remember this. And the idea of it being that when Harry was first being sorted into the right house of Hogwarts, there's um, Gryffindor, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw. See, I'm having to remember my Harry Potter knowledge now.
that's
Um,
it.
Essentially, the first thing the hat does is think really deeply and say, maybe Slytherin. But because Harry so badly wanted Gryffindor, he got Gryffindor. And I think it's a good metaphor for life in that, yeah, we all each have like kind of things we're naturally predisposed to more than others. But first of all, it takes time to figure out what those are. And second of all, it's not as, you know, set in stone as we think it might be. Um, you can learn to do certain things, and you can learn to do it even if you think you're not talented at them. There are many things that you can sort of learn to do, and I would say there are still certain aspects of, like, I'll tell you, like the operational side of entrepreneurship. Keeping the trains running on time. Making the eye to detail when it comes to like finances and stuff like that. It just doesn't, I don't have a natural aptitude for that. It just doesn't interest me as much as the more visionary, the more creative, the more sales and marketing and product. I'm kind of more interested in those sides as opposed to operations and staff and HR and hiring
Yeah.
and stuff like that, which I'm less interested in. So yeah, like even within entrepreneurship, there are different parts to it and things which you're more predisposed to and things which you're less so. Um, so yeah, it's a huge field. But yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, totally. So, how could someone figure out, like, if let's say they have something that they're not really naturally good at, how can they figure out if that's something that they should still work on, or if they just should forget about it and not really work on that anymore?
That's a great question. You have to just give it enough of a chance. I always say just try more things
Yeah.
and then see what you're naturally more predisposed to doing and what you naturally enjoy. Enjoying something is part of having a talent for it, I would say. I'll just bundle them in together and say if you enjoy something, then
Yeah.
that's like being talented at it, you know? It's not quite the same, but it's just useful to just bundle it together because if you're, let's say, naturally predisposed to something but you don't enjoy it, then you might as well not be because you're not going to keep at it and you're not going to get good enough at
Yeah.
it. And vice versa. If you're not naturally good at something, but if you really love it, then you'll just persist so much that you'll get good. And I think that's a key. So in other words, figure out what you love and figure out what you're naturally good at. And you can only figure that out through self-awareness, through action. You take action and you're self-aware of like, oh, I tried that. Here's what happened. Here's what people say. Here are the actual tangible outcomes. Here are the number of sales I got, let's say, or here's how much I was able to sell something for, or here's what some judges said about it, or here's what some very experienced people had to say about it. So these are the kinds of things that I would be looking at as signals of whether you should stick with it or whether you should try something else. Just kind of see how much traction you're getting.
Yeah, yeah, you're totally right. So, just kind of looking at the numbers more and like looking at, I guess, just like using logic more rather than emotion and your intuition.
Uh, yeah, I guess so. The logic side of it is looking at the tangible outcomes. So yeah, in that sense, absolutely. But I think the emotional and intuition sides of it also really matter. You kind of have to listen to all of those things. To be honest, it's kind of rare.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's kind of rare to have somebody completely delusional about their abilities, and that's why I guess it's so entertaining when you do see like those TV talent shows like X Factor or something like that, and somebody's completely delusional and thinks they can sing and they can't, and that's very entertaining, but it's actually quite rare. Most people that can't sing, like myself, know that we can't sing. So just as an example, I think that your intuition probably isn't as far off as you think in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense for sure. And that really reminds me of something that you talk about in the book, like the reality growth mindset. I want you to go into that more because I think that mindset is extremely important.
Yeah, that's basically the reality growth mindset is about how essentially if you have two choices, two extreme choices. One is having a fixed mindset, which means that whatever I'm good at, whatever I can do, whatever skills I have, those are the skills that I have. That's what I can do, and that's it. It's fixed. And a growth mindset is the
Yeah.
opposite. Like instead of saying I can't code, let's say, or I can't sell, or I can't do public speaking, you instead say you add the word yet. If you add the magical three-letter word yet at the end of the sentence, then it becomes a growth mindset. So you say I can't code yet. I can't do public speaking yet, etc. So that's the fixed mindset,
Yeah.
and which is that I can't learn it. I just am what I am. And the growth mindset is I can learn and become whatever I want to be. The reality growth mindset is a slightly more nuanced take. Of course, if you had to choose one of those two, definitely choose the growth mindset. Definitely.
Mhm.
The reality growth mindset is a slightly more realistic take. So, for example, you can't say, I'm not going to become an NBA player yet. Or I'm not going to win a Nobel Prize for physics yet. Probably it's not going to happen. So the reality aspect of it
Yeah.
is just, again, being aware of your strengths and weaknesses, being aware of where there is opportunity and where there isn't. Most of the time, it's better to err on the side of optimism, of believing that you can, because actually you could probably do a lot more than you believe you can. So you should try. But it's just acknowledging an obvious reality that we all kind of know and we don't really discuss.
Yeah, you're right, 100%. And I think a lot of the time, like having a growth mindset is is one of those things that like it's useful, but not necessarily true. Like it'll it'll like help you out to have a growth mindset, even though occasionally it might not be something that's like actually true in this situation. So
Exactly.
I'm just wondering, how has your mindset changed over time?
My mindset. I think I used to have a very much, speaking of the whole entrepreneurship thing, I used to have a very much
Yeah.
fixed mindset about entrepreneurship. I used to think that's not for me. I don't understand that. There was like the entrepreneurship society at university, and I never joined that. I never even considered it would be me. Um, what else has my mindset changed? I guess it changed from the extreme, growth mindset. So that's one area where I had a fixed mindset. By the way,
Yeah.
a really good side note is that you don't either have one or the other. Even for somebody with a growth mindset, you'll often have these blind spots where you'll have like a really fixed mindset in a certain area of your life. Even though you've read a lot of self-development and you kind of believe in yourself a lot of the time, you'll just suddenly somebody will point out to you that you'll say to them, "Oh, I'm just not good at that," and they'll be like, "But you can learn," and you'll be like, "Oh yeah," and you'll just forget. So that's just something to bear in mind. Is it's not universal. You either have it or you don't. You often have it, and you have blind spots to where you have a fixed mindset, which is usually pretty bad to have a fixed mindset. I would say for me, it was the shift of actually believing in um, unfair advantages was a shift. In the actual concept of the book, I used to kind of sort of fall into the trap of believing all the self-development books I was reading that you can achieve anything if you set your mind to it. And, we can, and sort of the underlying belief that we can all become, I don't know, billionaires if we just tried hard enough. Let's just use a silly example like
Yeah.
billionaires. And it's just not really true. It's not quite true. There's so many different circumstances that you often can't replicate to reach those crazy outlier levels of success, like to become a Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or, I don't know, Oprah Winfrey or whatever. So I think that was a huge shift for me, is to think of a much more balanced mindset, to think about unfair advantages, to realize that a lot of people I see who has success in business, often they're inheriting a family business, or their parents kind of encouraged them or taught them a lot about entrepreneurship from a young age, even if informally or subconsciously. Um, they often have like family investments and safety nets financially to be able to do that. And those are things that I guess I didn't think much about when I was younger. I was just kind of more thinking like everybody, almost thinking everybody starts from the same starting line, kind of subconsciously just thinking that. And it's just so far from the truth. It's ridiculous. That was a big shift for me.
Yeah, oh, what was that?
And that was a big shift for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like what you said earlier as well about like you have a growth mindset in some areas of your life, but then in other areas you have more of a fixed mindset, and it's not really a black and white thing, like you either have it or you don't. And that like really reminds me. So I I guess I could say I'm not really naturally a disciplined person. Like naturally, I think I have a pretty lazy mindset, but I ended up developing discipline pretty well. But something I realized was like I'm really disciplined in this area of my life, but not in this area. And it's just not really like a black and white thing. Like it's not like I have it or I don't. It's something that like I like I like really need to work on it in certain areas of my life. And like that also brings me to another question I wanted to ask you. Because I feel like a lot of people they're kind of like how I was before. Like they really want to achieve big things, but they like you can say they're not really a naturally disciplined person, or they have like a lazy mindset. But something you talk about a lot in your book is like your disadvantages can be your unfair advantages. So how can someone leverage like that kind of mindset and make that one of their advantages?
Again, another great question, Samuel. I'll tell you, I was the same. Very much kind of more of a naturally lazy person, you could say. In many ways, not like, especially if you look at when I started a business, how hard I was working, the long hours I was working. But that wasn't a natural thing. That was kind of, I was pushed to do it by myself, of like wanting to make a business succeed, wanting to prove that this was the right decision for me, kind of wanting to validate that life decision of like quitting my job, etc. So, um, but I think it kind of comes in handy. I see some of my friends, some people that I know, who are very hardworking and high energy, but they'll often do things that are much more gonna be time for money. So even when they're not when they're not employees per se. So being an employee, of course, that's time for money, right? But even when they're not, they're kind of doing more freelance things where they're literally selling their time for money, and they could be making really good money because their per hour rate is not bad, and they just work a ton of hours. Like they just make up. I mean, it's not a great hourly rate, but they just make up for it just with tons and tons of hours. And I'm
Yeah,
kind of more like, is that? How can I get more leverage? How can I get more bang
exactly.
for my
Yeah.
buck? And I think thinking that way has made me much more creative to find businesses, to find services, to be able to add value to people, to clients, to businesses in a way that is much more, again, like uh, in terms of number of hours. I mean, my first business was literally designed to be a passive income business ultimately. So that's why I had that thinking from the first place. So that helped. But also, I was thinking like that from the get go. And I think that's helped me massively, and also can at times hurt me because I can kind of not, and I need to work on that a little bit more of like, okay, let's just proactively put in more hours. Reactively is fine. If you have clients, if you have deadlines, of course, I'm going to put the hours in. If my book deadline's coming up, if something's coming up, yeah, cool. I'm going to work crazy hours. That's fine. But to proactively do it is another thing. That's much more difficult when you're being creative, when you're being, working on stuff where there's nobody breathing down your neck, where there's no strict deadlines, no one's paid you for it, and it's just kind of a proactive new project. that's when it can be difficult to put those hours in. And so, yeah, it's pros and cons, but I think it's very useful to see that disadvantage of like, I'm always looking for the, let's say, shortcut, but not in an unethical or a ridiculous way. I'm not looking to get rich overnight. I'm actually looking to set up systems. I'm actually looking to create ways to add value. I know it's going to be a lot of work up front, but ultimately, even if I'm going to work crazy hours, I know at the end of the 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, I can then, delegate and automate things so that I can spend less time on it and I could start new projects and focus on other projects. And so having that strategic goal has helped me massively. So that's just one example from my own life. But other examples could just be very, very simple. Having less money, if money is a weakness in terms, it's not an unfair advantage of having a lot
Yeah.
of money, you become more creative, you become more resourceful. That was definitely me when I was starting out. I didn't have the money to invest. So, yeah, every unfair advantage has a corresponding disadvantage, and every disadvantage has a corresponding advantage as well. It's just if you have the right mindset to, think of it as a double-edged sword and use it in that way. And we go into that in depth in the book.
Yeah, I really like that part of the book. And it's like so true as well. Because money can either be your biggest strength or your biggest weakness. And that's like pretty much everything, I think. So, how can someone discover like what their unfair advantages are?
Yeah, so discovering your unfair advantages is mostly about knowing thyself. It comes back to that thing I said,
Yeah.
self-awareness, which takes time. It took me until my late 20s, when I was much older than you, to figure out, oh, communication is an unfair advantage of mine. That's how I've been getting clients, is I'm able to explain like complex concepts of like branding, marketing, direct response marketing, copywriting, um, strategy in very simple terms that anybody could understand. And therefore, I'm able to build trust. I'm able to kind of connect with people, and therefore, I'm able to get clients and then deliver. So that's a
Yeah.
big unfair advantage of mine that I was able to get by going down that sort of path. Um, and and therefore, I realized, okay, writing and communicating is something I should focus on more, right? So it took time to try lots of different things, to get feedback from the world, and to know, okay, what am I good at? So that's internally, what are my strengths? And also externally, what are my circumstantial strengths? So we came up with a framework called the Miles framework. Miles stands for, M is for money, I is for intelligence and insight, L is for location and luck, which is right place and right time. E is education and expertise, and S is for status. And status is how you're perceived. It's what people think of you, what their first impressions of you are, what your
Yeah.
reputation is, what's your personal brand. Those are all part of your status. That's like your outer status. Your inner status is what you think of yourself, how you perceive yourself, which massively changes how others perceive you as well. So those are the 5 categories, the Miles framework, MILES. And by going through each of those categories, you can figure out your strengths and weaknesses, both internal and external. And also, we've developed a quiz, a completely free quiz you could take. If you go to the unfairacademy.com, you can click take a quiz. It's right there on the page. And it'll take about
Yeah.
2 to 5 minutes to fill out a quiz and find out and get some insights on your unfair advantages. It's just a starting point. It's a starting point to think about it. Even
Yeah,
the
I'll
book.
I'll put that in the description.
Yeah. And it's just a way to really make you think about each thing and to rank you. It ranks you and gives you a score for each of them. And that gives you some insights about what you have going for you already based on how you sort of kind of categorize yourself within those categories by answering the questions in the quiz. Um, yeah, so those
Yeah.
are the ways
Yeah,
to
and
figure it out.
hell yeah. Yeah, I think like this is such a good idea that you got, and I'm super glad that you guys made it into a book, and it's like really getting out there because I think this is something that so many more people need to know about. Like, it's like life isn't fair, but you can manipulate it at and like you can kind of manipulate your chances in a way that gives you the unfair advantage in a situation that you like might not have it in. So I think this is just such a good thing to be aware of, and I'd highly recommend this book to anyone who's listening. So I I really want to dive into you overcoming your fear of public speaking because I really like how you did that, and I want you to talk about that more so the audience like understands it a bit more and then has like a framework for going for overcoming their fears. So you said that you overcame the fear of public speaking by changing your beliefs about it. I want you to tell me more about that.
Yeah. Essentially, a lot of it was about thinking that you have something to offer. Essentially, it's just finding
Yeah.
out that there's something there that people want to hear. And you know, often if you just think about something enough, research by like not just purely thinking, like researching it, being interested in it, you're going to come up with some insights that others are going to find useful because they haven't done that research. They haven't read those books, for example, or watched those YouTube videos or whatever it might be. And so you probably have a lot more to share and a lot more to give than you think. And people want to hear it. If you can like summarize something nicely and kind of give it to them and do it with enthusiasm and with passion, people are just surprisingly interested to hear about it. Even if you're not whatever you think you have to be. I don't know. You're not like a PhD or some kind of like a published author, let's say, for like myself. So
Yeah.
people think that you have to fit these kind of categories, but I started it way earlier and I realized, oh, this is something that people do enjoy, people get value from. And most of it at the beginning is just getting over your own nerves. For most people are very scared, including myself, of public speaking. It's I think the most common fear in the world is the fear of public speaking. Um, and then it's just a case of, and I kind of already hinted at this, you realize it by doing it. So you just have to push yourself to
Yeah.
do it. And then you get the progressive desensitization of like, oh, it's not that bad. Oh, it's not that bad. And over time, even if something goes wrong, you forget what you're going to say or something. It's kind of not the end of the world. And you can do that by having lower stakes speaking engagements at first. So a great tip for that is an international organization called Toastmasters, which has chapters in like almost every city in the world, I believe. And it's just a friendly group of people who meet up and practice public speaking and give each other feedback on the public speaking style that they give, not the content, just the delivery. And it's very useful. And they often have the challenge to go up and speak for 2 minutes or 1 minute or 3 minutes or whatever. And if you just push yourself to do it, even if you don't feel comfortable, you'll feel great because you'll slowly get over that fear. And that's kind of what I did, because I used to be terrified. And actually, I don't know if you know this story, Samuel. I once fainted giving a talk to just like a
Oh,
small
wow.
tutorial. Like it's called a tutorial in
Yeah.
university where it's just a classroom with like 10 other people. Like that's it. Like 10 other students. And like nobody was even interested. It wasn't even a high stakes situation. I don't know what was the matter with me, but I was for some reason super nervous that day. And I just find myself on the floor at one point. And it was super embarrassing. And I remember when it happened, I'm like, I'm never going to tell anybody about this. And then I realized actually this is a really interesting thing to share, because then I went back to the same university and gave a TED talk, and that went really well. And I got like a lot of high ratings and feedback for that talk. Um, in fact, in the official TED subreddit, I think it was one of the highest rated talks, which is really cool. So like you could actually find that on YouTube, my TEDx talk at SOAS University, where I give a talk there. Um, and yeah, I used to, and I'm even in that, I'm a little bit nervous at the beginning. You can kind of tell if you really pay attention. It's not that obvious, but right at the start, you can kind of tell I'm a little bit nervous. But yeah, since then, I've spoken at so many different companies, at so many different conferences, huge crowds. It's been great. So yeah, it's just something that you can get past and get over.
Yeah, putting the reps in is huge. Like I found when I first started this podcast, I got super anxious before I did the podcast because I treated it as such a high stakes situation. And like that was happening until like up until a little while ago. And and I find just by putting the reps in, like that fear and anxiety has has really gone away. So how can someone learn to change their beliefs about the things that they fear?
How to learn to change beliefs. I think again it goes back to the just doing it. Progressive desensitization, which happens basically that just means you're not so sensitive to it over time. You just realize, oh, it's not that big of a deal. So if somebody's scared of spiders, then if they start by just looking at pictures of spiders, and then they start by looking at fake, holding fake spiders, and over time with many reps, and reminding themselves that there's nothing to fear for the most part, especially if you're not in Australia or something. I mean, if you're in the UK, I think even in North America, they're generally not dangerous, I believe. Um, so yeah, and just telling yourself that and just exposing yourself to it. Same as if you're scared of roller coasters, just get on that roller coaster and you'll realize it's probably not as bad as you thought. And over time, the more you do it, the more you realize, it's fine. You push yourself outside of that comfort zone and you can get more comfortable with it. It's the same with the fear of selling. Selling is probably the most important skill in any business.
Right.
Asking for money in exchange for a product or service. And you can only get past that fear by doing it. And of course, there are some beliefs like, this is valuable, this is an equal exchange. I'm not trying to, scam anybody. I'm not trying to trick anybody or cheat anybody. I'm actually wanting to give value. I'm trying to help them. I'm trying to do something valuable. I have, a satisfaction guarantee, for example. There are all these different ways to just reduce that fear and start selling. So a lot of coaching clients that I work with, YouTubers, creators who want to start selling something like an online course or even start selling services to clients or just, want to become entrepreneurs. A lot of it is getting over that fear of selling. And it's just a case of doing it so that you realize, oh, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, yeah, that's huge for sure. And I think the key is just doing it incrementally, like you said, like starting off with touching a photo of a spider and then like touching a fake spider, then like touching a real one, just like slowly working yourself up. So yeah, I know that you've been super successful with coaching creators such as Ali Abdaal. What are some of the things that you see in those creators that like what are some challenges that you see them go through that like you help them through with your coaching?
Um, so there's two different types of creators that I work with. One is creators just starting out, but they have the unfair advantage of money to invest in a coach. Coaching can be quite expensive, so it's like a big investment. And so if they have that, so often that's like if they've had success with a previous business or with a career that they've had success in, or just some kind of luck, like they're rich, their parents are rich, or they've had some inheritance or whatever. They just have access to
Yeah.
capital in some way, and they want to get into it, and they want to figure out what's my niche. Niche is often a big question of like, what do I talk about? Let's say I want to do YouTube. What do I talk about? So that's a big area that I coach in is niche. How to niche down because it's an art and a science. It takes a lot of awareness of your own self, your own unfair advantages and your own interests, and what you want to teach and what value you want to give. Assuming they want to teach something, let's say, because that's often who I work with. I work with educational creators. So people who are trying to teach something to
Yeah.
their audience, particularly who are trying to help their audience to level up in some way. So that's one area, is like niching down. Another area is when they're a little bit more established, but not very. They can still be quite small, but they want to sell online courses. And so
Yeah.
selling something can be quite scary. Or like negotiating better better partnership deals and sponsors. Those are the areas that I can, that they really get stuck in, and I help with. Another area is those who want to write a book, kind of similar to niching down. What's the book idea? What exactly is the concept of the book? How to write an amazing book proposal, how that works, what does that mean? How do you get a literary agent? How do you get a publishing deal? How do you get publishers interested? Those are areas that I help in. And it's very similar for entrepreneurs who are just starting out or in the early stages. Those are the areas that I help with. What else does that include? The other, I guess, is content marketing, which is very similar to being a creator. So you see the through line there. It's like strategy, sales, niching down, and strategy in terms of like who you're targeting, and communication and like content creation from that sense. So those are the real focuses of mine. It's like my bread and butter, what I really enjoy working on.
Yeah, I know that mindset is a really big part of that as well. What are what are like some of the most common limiting beliefs you can say that you see in the people that you work with that like you help them through?
Um, who would want to hear from me? Why would they want to learn from me? Very similar to the public speaking one, right? Like, who am I to
Yeah.
share advice, give information, or who am I to write a book? That's one limiting belief. Another is people are going to think I'm scammy. People are going to think I'm just in it for the money. People are going to say that I'm a grifter, that I'm just trying to cash in, that I'm a sellout. Those are the fears of selling, usually. Um,
Yeah.
and about niching, the biggest limiting belief is, oh, I've just got so many things I'm interested in, or so many things I want to talk about. Wouldn't it be too um, narrow? Wouldn't that limit my audience too much? That's often a limiting belief about niching down. Um, yeah, those are. It's a case of confidence. It's a case of understanding what value you have to bring. It's a case of understanding that you're worthy, and that's the inner game. It's mostly an inner game. What do they say that success is 90% mindset and 10% mechanics, doing stuff.
Yeah.
But you get the mindset by doing stuff. So that's the key difference. It's not just like sit there and just read self-development books and do affirmations. No, you have to get the mindset and the psychology by doing stuff. So it seems like 10% is tiny, but it's actually not really about how you do things as much as it is having the right mindset. So, I can give you lots of different, let's say let's come up with a random example. Let's say you're a freelance I don't know, video editor, let's say. Okay. Now,
Mhm.
as a freelance video editor, you wish you could make more money. You could charge more money for your service. How do you do that? Well, I can give you techniques and I can give you strategies, and that will be helpful. But most of the time, it's about having the right mindset of like, what I do is valuable, what I do is great. This is worth charging more. I can ask for more money for this. And yeah, most of the time that's the limiting factor. Sometimes obviously there is competence, there is actual skill involved that you
Yeah.
need to be good at. I'm assuming that that's there. That's the same for a business. When you talk about sales and marketing, assuming the product is good or the service is good. Otherwise, what's the point? So, that's a given. So the same with you being like, let's say, a freelancer, assuming that your editing is good, it's just a case of you knowing your worth and charging more. And that's a psychological thing, much more than it is a strategy thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like the mindset is like the prerequisite to having the skill. Like it comes before that. Like you can't have the skill if you don't have the mindset.
Yeah, that's right. You have to have a foundation. It's like one of my coaching clients wrote a book called The Hacker Mindset, which is going to come out sometime soon. I think in the next 6 months. He came up with a great concept that he shared with me. He's a very successful entrepreneur himself, and he's a computer hacker, an ethical computer hacker, the one who like defends
Oh
against
yeah.
the bad hackers. So he's an expert in computer security, information security, I think they call it, IS, information security. And one of the concepts that's in his book that I kind of helped him develop as an idea is this pendulum swing between strategy and execution. And it's kind of like strategy is sort of mindset and execution is action, right? And the question is, which one is more important? And of course, they're both extremely, extremely important. And a good way to think about it is he describes it as a pendulum. So you have to go start a strategy. You have to have some kind of baseline strategy. Otherwise, what are you doing? You're just doing actions at random. Like you have to have some kind of strategy, some kind of mindset at the beginning. So you start off with strategy, and then you swing into action, and then you have to go back to strategy to review how was the action that you took, the execution. What was the feedback? What did people say? How many people bought? How many people clicked? What was the conversion rate? What was the impressions? How many views did it get? That's the feedback. And then you have to then strategize from there. So it's back and forth, strategy, execution. And mindset and strategy is not the same thing, but there's a lot of
Yeah.
crossover because kind of mindset is a bit more about the beliefs that you have, and strategy is more like, okay, what's the big picture kind of way I'm going to achieve my goal, the how. But they're both in your head, they're both in your head. They're not actions. And that's the similarity that they have. But it's kind of like you see the similarity there of like having the right mindset, you take action, it also feeds back into your mindset. Oh, I offered a coaching package for, let's say if you're just starting out at coaching, I offered a $2,000 coaching package, let's say a 3-month coaching program.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a beginner coach and I charge that. And guess what? They didn't find that nuts. That's the first person I spoke to. I've been told that that's not crazy, that I can add that much value. Okay, cool. I offered it to somebody. Okay, they didn't buy, but also they didn't think it was crazy. Interesting. Okay, let me take some more action. Now I've spoken to 10 people. Actually, one of them bought. 2 of them said they might, but it's just not the right timing. And then the other, 7 said no, they can't afford it or whatever it is. It's just not quite right for them. Again, that feeds back to your mindset. Oh, I can charge 2,000. Actually, they didn't even negotiate. Maybe I can charge 3,000 next time. Okay, let's see what kind of success stories I get first of all. Am I actually creating results for them? Am I helping them get results? Are they getting ROI? That's a big question. If somebody, I have coaching clients that, have invested like, 5 digits. Let's say like 12, it varies, but like $12,000 or $16,000. But if they made $40,000 within a month because of that, then that's you don't even have to think about that. That's like, oh, cool, no brainer. Let me do that. Keep doing that. So that's the thing. The question is, are you adding value? Is there ROI? What feedback do you get from the world? What feedback do you get from customers? What feedback do you get from users? How many views are you getting? What are the comments that you're getting, etc., etc. So whatever niche that you're in, whatever you're doing, it goes back and forth between mindset and execution and action, and strategy and action also. And you have to keep swinging back and forth, because if you're only in the mindset game and you're just reading books and you're just theory and strategies, it's no good. You'll get nowhere. And if you're just taking action, also mindlessly taking action, then again, you're going to fail, because you're just going to be running in the wrong direction. You're going to make really terrible decisions because you don't understand the right strategy and the right mindset to approach this with. So very important to have a balance of both.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And 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 really just balancing them out and not like neglecting either one. Because I found there's been times in my life, or like times running my business, where it's like I've been either all action or like all mindset. And I find like when I'm just taking action, things never go as well as I want them to. And that's the same when I'm like all learning and I'm like doing all the mindset stuff. So it's really just like balancing both. And I guess it's more of an 80-20 thing. Would you agree?
Uh, which way around do you see the 80-20?
Like like it switches. Like sometimes it would be 80% learning, 20% action. Sometimes it'd be 20% action, 20% learning.
Yeah. I've never thought of it as an 80-20 thing. Let me have a think about that. So the 80-20 rule is the Pareto principle, which is that 80% of the results that you're going to get comes from 20% of the actions that you take. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just a kind of a rule of nature. It just kind of exists. Should there be an 80-20 split between, I would say probably, having thought about it now, I would say about 20% of the time should be spent on learning, like as in book learning, theory learning, and then
Hmm.
80% of the time should be based on action. And I don't think, rarely should it switch to the other way. Rarely.
Okay.
We're talking about in the context of like business success or real world success, let's call it that. So, like, if you wanted to learn history, that doesn't really have an action component to it. You know, if you want to learn
Yeah.
mathematics, that kind of does with the exercises. But like, again, it's mostly a theoretical thing. Let's say philosophy. Generally, these are kind of more theoretical things. These are things that you can learn. You can learn history, and you could just sit there and study, and that's great. I think there's no harm in it. It depends what your goals are, right? And I think it's very valuable to learn history.
Mhm.
It's even more valuable to learn it so you can learn lessons and then apply them in your life, and that's the action component. But let's just say in general, you go
Yeah.
to university or something. So those are times, I guess, where you would spend 80 or even 100% of the time just learning. Um, but if you want life success, assuming that that's what you're looking for, which means, what does that mean? That usually means a financial component to it, at least to some extent. Maybe
Mhm.
recognition, some kind of achievements, maybe awards or accolades. I guess you can get that in the academic world, but in general, you need to take action. You need, even in the academic world, there's the action component of that. I guess maybe you're writing papers. I'm not sure. So yeah, I would say it's mostly about doing, but you still need to go back to learning. You still need to have at least 20% where you're like reading books or getting feedback. Learning isn't just from books or videos. You can learn from people. You can learn from watching. You can learn from feedback. You can learn from teachers. You can learn from mentors. There's lots of different ways of learning. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I've never thought of it as an 80-20 thing. I think that fits quite nicely. 20% learning, 80% doing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think something that's really helped me with learning is just like spending time thinking. Like going for walks and
Mm.
just like yeah, spending time like thinking and journaling helps so much. So, yeah. Yeah, the last question I want to ask you is a question that I ask a lot of my guests. So, what would you want to do before you die? Like, what would be on your bucket list?
Yeah, you're this. I haven't had this question much, but lately podcasters have been asking me this, and I remember the first time I was asked this
Oh,
question,
really?
I actually thought about it, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't really have a bucket list per se. I mean, there are countries that I want to visit that I've never visited before. Like, I'd love to go to Japan. Just as one example, there's quite a few that I haven't been to yet. Um, bucket list. I would say something I'm already working on, which is that I'm looking to launch a YouTube channel, and that's been something I guess you could say on my bucket list, but I kind of don't think of it that way. I think of it more as just a goal, as opposed to like a bucket
Yeah.
list kind of implies a long list of things, and I just need to tick them off before I die. And I kind of don't see it that way. I see it more as just like this is what I want to do with my life, as like a vocation, as some, as my occupation, as the thing that I do, which is YouTube.
Like thinking more about the journey rather than the destination.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Like, I guess destination wise, yeah, it would be nice to get, I don't know, at one point to get 1 million subs. That'd be lovely. I think that, I think that's very doable. I think I should be there. I don't know how long. But yeah, brings me to my point, which is YouTube. But not just any YouTube, just to be a YouTuber, but instead to actually do specifically like a very long form documentary style, high production value videos. That's what I'm looking to do. So I guess you could say that's the closest thing I have to a bucket list, but I'm kind of already working on that. So that's quite cool. Um, when it comes to things like skydiving and stuff, yeah, that sounds cool. I'll be up for it. I'm quite adventurous in that kind of thing. Um, but I'm not like itching to do it. I've already done bungee jumping, which was terrifying. I kind of felt like it was one of those. Speaking of progressive desensitization, it was one of the rare things where after I'd done it, I was almost more scared than before. In a way, because
Yeah.
it was really terrifying. It was the highest one in the UK. It was like I think it was 300 feet, and it was pretty. That free fall moment when you first step off the platform was insane. So I've done stuff like that before. I've already done quite a lot of traveling. What else do people put on their bucket list? What, like swimming with sharks and stuff? I don't really care. I don't know. Well, give me more examples of like bucket list things. What's in your bucket list, Samuel? Let me think this through.
Something huge for me would be to give a TED talk.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, yeah, honestly, just helping as many people as possible. Like I think that's like my main life goal. That was the whole reason I started this podcast, just so I can like help as many people as I can, and real and yeah, really just like change lives and make an impact on the world.
Nice.
That
But
for
how do you know
sure.
when you've hit that point? That's the question. So this is my job as a coach, is I would ask a client, I would say, okay, so that's your goal. How would you know when you got there? What's your success criteria? What's the tangible way that you're like concrete, okay, here's how I know I've affected this many lives? Because I'm sure you've already affected many with your podcast. But like, yeah, how do you quantify that? How do you know you've reached it?
That's a very good question. Hmm. I guess like the best metric would be like subscribers or maybe members of my community. Like if I one thing I want to do is start one of those private communities. So like I think that would be a good way to judge it. Or people who are like on my Discord, because then like that shows that they like are actually into my content and like it's
Nice.
actually helping.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. It's great. Yeah, I think if I hadn't yet written a book, I would definitely say write a book, you know? But now that I've
Yeah.
written one, publishers want me to write a second one, but I'm kind of more interested in doing video. So that's just me. Maybe I'd like to get I don't know, at some point. This isn't like a goal that I have for the next 5 or 10, maybe 10 years. Maybe like a 10-year goal is I'd
Yeah.
like to one day have some kind of show, program, documentary, something. I'm not sure what. Movie? I don't know. I've never thought that through. But like have something like that made. Like actually be in charge of it, like actually like write the script or produce it or be the main kind of, let's say, showrunner or something. That would be really cool. Well, I haven't given that much thought. That's like something I kind of came up with now where I'm like, yeah, I guess that would be really, really cool. Um, but I guess I'm kind of already I'm working on doing that for YouTube anyway. And I think the world is changing. So that might be just like, that's enough. Like, what does it need to be on Netflix for it to be legit? Like, I know people who've actually sold their documentaries to Netflix. So that could be something I do in the future. Who knows? Um, yeah, we'll see. I don't know. Something like that.
That's super cool. Yeah. Well, anyways, I know that you got to go now, so thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing all your wisdom. That was a great time for me, and you shared a lot of extremely valuable stuff. So, thanks a lot for being here, son.
No worries. Thanks, Samuel. Thanks for having me and for your great questions. If anybody wants to like be in touch with me, I'm on social medias. I still personally reply to all my DMs myself. I don't delegate that out to anybody. I don't have a team who take care of that. So if you see a reply, that's going to be from me. I can't get back to everybody, but I do my best. I do read basically every message, I guess, unless it hits the spam folders or something. But I read every message
Yeah.
I get on social media, on email, etc. And yeah, like if you want to kind of be part of the email list, you can take the quiz. And from there, you can tick a box to say you want to be part of the newsletter. And I'm looking to start doing some kind of like semi-regular newsletter thing. I only want to do something if it's super valuable. I don't want to be one of those people who just like spams out emails. I'll never want to do that. What I want to do is like really valuable
Hmm.
stuff. So that's what I have in mind to do next. And then you'll also be the first to hear when I do launch my YouTube, which I've been working on for a while. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'll
Yeah,
be
and
working
I
on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, all that's gonna be linked in the description. And I was gonna say, if you're doing that newsletter, you could maybe like record yourself just doing like just talking about what you say on the newsletter, and then make that a YouTube video.
Nice, yeah. That could be something I do. I have a few thoughts in mind. There are lots of interesting, really cool things coming up for 2024.
Awesome, man. Well, everything's going to be linked in the description. So if you want to follow Hassan or DM him, just go down to the description and you can find all social media as well as the quotes we were talking about earlier.
Thanks, Samuel.
Anyways, yeah. Well, appreciate you coming on and I'll see you later.
Bye.